Steve Huston has been one of my favorite art instructors online, so I couldn't have been more excited to start his constructive figure drawing class, but things didn't go as expected. I often lose motivation during a class, but what happened for this one was different. If it's your first time here, my name is Julie, I study art online with New Masters Academy, and this is my experience taking Constructive Figure Drawing 1 with Steve Huston. Before I start, I just want to quickly thank New Masters Academy for supporting this video. This class is currently part of the Drawing Foundations module, so when you take New Masters Academy as an online art school and you follow the tracks, it is part of the first module that you are going to take, and it is the first class that introduces you to figure drawing. It has 7 lessons. At NMA they call each lesson a week, but you can take them at your own pace, do more than one in a week or do them in more than 1 week. But it has 7 lessons, and each one of them comes with specific assignments that you can submit and get interactive feedback from a teacher assistant. Steve Huston is an amazing instructor that maybe you know from his own YouTube content. He's made a few classes for New Masters Academy, he's one of their first instructors, and his approach focuses heavily on gesture and structure, and that's what this class is all about as well. I had a bit of a unique situation with this class because I took the Drawing Foundations module before it was changed, and so when I finished the Drawing Foundations module, this class wasn't part of it. But the reason why I decided to take it is that after I finished the Drawing Foundations module, they opened up the figure drawing module for interactive feedback. And it happens that within the figure drawing module, there is Constructive Figure Drawing 2 with Steve Huston. So that's basically the second part to Constructive Figure Drawing 1 that is part of the Drawing Foundations module. So that's a weird situation that you shouldn't get into, but I wanted to have the first part of the class before I went to take the second one in the next module, and this is the reason why I decided to go back and take it, despite the fact that I had finished the module officially and I had taken more difficult classes. So that was a step back in the tracks, but that being said, I had no doubt that I was going to love this class because I had taken a few courses with Steve Huston and his teaching style just resonates with me. I've been enjoying each class I took with him, I've been enjoying the assignments, and I've also been extremely inspired by his vision of art. As I said, the class has 7 weeks. The first weeks are an introduction to the idea of gesture and structure, what it is, how these two things work together. Then it goes more in depth into each of these notions, and then you learn how to draw each part of the body using simple forms, before you move on to light logic and rendering strategies. I started the class in October 15 and I finished it in December 11. That's funny because I often submit more than one assignment every week, but I often end up spending the same amount of weeks as what the track suggests. So I would submit 2 assignments a week for the start when I was very excited, and then I take a break and I lose motivation, and by the end of the course I force myself to go through the end and I start submitting again, and it averages out to about the amount of weeks that is announced for the class. So it took me 2 months. In the first weeks I was very motivated, but at the same time I was more advanced than this class. And since I had already taken courses with Steve Huston and I was familiar with his way of thinking, his method, all of the concepts that he talks about in this class were not new for me. I still learned things, I still deepened my understanding of those concepts, but nothing was completely new and groundbreaking, and it was mostly an opportunity to deepen my understanding and also practice. So I decided to try to do my very best with the assignments and to challenge myself a little bit more, because in this class Steve Huston draws with an overhand grip, so that's how he takes his pencil and he makes these gestural lines this way, which involves a different way of moving your body than the natural, for me, the more natural writing grip. And I've been practicing it a little bit in the early courses of the Drawing Foundations module, but I haven't done a lot of it, and so I decided to challenge myself to try to get very comfortable with it and use each assignment as an opportunity not only to do my best with the assignment itself, but also to try to practice and to get very comfortable with this grip, which was difficult. I actually spent a lot of time just practicing the grip and doing some warm-up exercises with this grip and really working on my body movements to get as good as I possibly could. And by the end of the first 3 weeks maybe, I was starting to feel a lot better with it. I think I reached this point where I was very comfortable with the grip, but it's not the best grip for details. So basically I would do most of the drawing with this grip, and I think I got why people like it for gesture, but then when I moved on to the final lines, the final refinements and small details of the drawing, I would use my more natural grip, and I found a way to work that just works for me. Since I already had some practice using simple forms to draw the body parts, I tried to break down the forms a little bit more than what is expected in the course. This is the first course where you do figure drawing, so it is not meant to be very refined, so to speak, but I tried to go just one step further, and I was encouraged in this by the TA that I submitted my assignments to, so that was Alex. Thank you, Alex. But yeah, after these initial weeks and the challenge that I gave myself, I really lost steam, I lost motivation, which is completely normal for these kinds of long projects. This isn't a quick class, this isn't something that you're going to do in just 1 week. More likely it is going to span over multiple weeks, and that's also the time you need to be able to digest this information and really take the most out of it. When you get started, you're all motivated, excited, and all of that, and as you approach the midpoint, the initial excitement starts to fade out. You realize that it's just a lot of work and you're not close enough to the end yet to get this final boost of motivation and this idea that the end is near. And I experienced this, but there were also 2 other things that came to play for me. The first one is that I had a drawing methods conflict. So I didn't take this class in isolation. I was also taking another class at the same time that is called Classical Drawing and Design with Joshua Jacobo. I took a lot out of this class. It was completely different from every drawing class I had taken to this point. So it was really about very basic geometric notions and how everything we do in drawing is geometry in the end, because it is all about making marks on a flat piece of paper and the way the placement of these marks relate to one another and the edges of the paper. That was, for me, a life-changing class, and I had a lot of courses that were great, but this one specifically changed my approach of drawing. It changed the way I see drawing in such a deep way. I was transformed, really, while I was also taking Constructive Figure Drawing 1. And this geometric approach, this way of seeing drawing, and this very analytical way of thinking about every mark we make just happens to resonate very well with me, and this is naturally what I want to do. And it doesn't work very well with Steve's approach. So I don't want to say that these are not compatible, that it is something like a choice that you have to make. There are things to take in both approaches, and I tried to make them work together. I tried to have this rigor and this analytical way of thinking from the geometry, and also have the gestural lines and the more sketchy approach from Steve Huston. Not that it is impossible, but I failed at this. It didn't work very well, and I ended up mostly frustrated by this. For me, when you take a class, the way to take the most out of what you learn is to put aside everything that you knew in drawing until this point, all of your habits, everything that you did, your previous process. You just put it aside, listen to the teacher, and decide to, at least for a moment, trust the teacher and do things exactly the way they do it and follow their process. That's a very difficult thing to do, especially if you already have a lot of experience in drawing, because you want to make pretty things and you know that your usual process, your usual way of thinking gives you a certain result. But at the same time, it is when you try another process and another way of thinking that you can grow the most. That's where you get this effect of feeling like you're taking step backs in your drawing skills, so that you can learn something that is so different from what you already know that by the end you will be a stronger artist. As I was taking the geometry class at the same time, there was a very strong conflict for me, and I really wanted to use this as well, and I struggled to try to separate the two completely. So maybe also you don't want to take any classes together at the same time. I am just thinking this right now, but maybe that was one of the problems for me and I shouldn't have taken these at the same time. And the second thing that happened is that my own interests in drawing shifted while I was taking the class. So I wanted to take the figure drawing module because, one, it was the next module that was open for interactive feedback, and interactive feedback is an important part of my learning at New Masters Academy, but also because I wanted to make figurative art. But while I was taking Constructive Figure Drawing 1, I got back into my interest for botanical art and for ornamental art as well. I wasn't into figures that much anymore. I was also working on my first illustration commission, that is an illustration with multiple figures in a pirate universe. I was very excited about this commission, but as I was working on it, I realized that's not what I want to do. These kind of compositions, these kinds of illustrations are really not what I have the most pleasure doing and what I see myself doing in the long run, whereas botanicals and ornaments and potentially some figures as well is something that I can really enjoy and see myself doing for a very long time. So this realization also pushed me away from Constructive Figure Drawing 1. I still learned things during this class. I improved my skills with the overhand grip and just good practice in figure drawing, and my takeaways are mostly about the most repeated, the most core concepts of Steve Huston's teaching that are gesture and structure and what he calls the binary system, and this way of thinking that he applies to many different concepts in art, the whole versus the parts. And I think it is an interesting and useful framework that I want to keep thinking about in my own art as well. The way that he thinks about gesture as the curved central axis of the form, and the way he uses curved lines as the sides of cylinders for various body parts was also not necessarily what I want to keep doing, but I think a very efficient way to do it. Same with the idea of using curved structural forms, so you use spheres, cylinders and boxes, but in a more organic, curved way, and that is something that gives you a more organic looking result while still having the benefits of a structural approach, especially when it comes to lighting. And also this idea of simple yet characteristic that he repeats so often, and I think I need to also repeat myself often when I do figure drawing and when I do gesture drawing sessions, because it is very powerful and he is such a master at it. Overall, I took more out of the first weeks than the last ones, because the last couple weeks are about light logic and rendering strategies. And in terms of light logic, I've done the entire Drawing Foundations module. I've been explained light logic a few times at this point. I don't pretend that I master it, but yeah, I get it. And for the rendering strategies, it is just light logic applied to a specific material. In this case, it was charcoal and pastels, and I had a good surprise with pastels. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, but it turned out that I enjoyed it more than I was expecting. But charcoal, I used carbon pencils that are slightly less messy than real charcoal for this, but still really not my favorite, so I did the assignment and this is not something that I want to keep practicing. My recommendation, if you take classes at New Masters Academy, is to follow the tracks and to take it as an art school and take every class in order in the Drawing Foundations module. That's how I made progress. If I had allowed myself to jump around, I just wouldn't have stayed so long, wouldn't have understood as much, wouldn't have known what I was missing. So that's really my recommendation. My experience is a bit different from what it is supposed to be, but I think the class, as it is in the Drawing Foundations module, as the first class dedicated to figure drawing, is absolutely great. I think if I had taken it before later classes, I would have learned a lot and it would have made other classes easier. Currently, it is a choice point in the Drawing Foundations module, so when you reach this point, you can choose either Constructive Figure Drawing 1 with Steve Huston, or you can take Introduction to the Figure with Sheldon Borenstein. I haven't taken the Sheldon Borenstein class completely, but I've been listening to a few lessons and both are great. You could take this class on its own and learn a lot. It is a great class, but it is so much better to take it within the module, and if you're curious about the entire Drawing Foundations module at New Masters Academy, I made an entire video about my review of the module after I completed it with interactive feedback. I will put a link right now so that you can check it out. Thank you for watching this one, keep drawing, and I will see you in the next one.